The Stone Lake by Joan Aiken, Chapter 2. Even with the added power of her steam screw, it took the Thrush a week to make her way down the coast of Roman America as far as Tenby. For 3 days, while they were crossing the equator, the weather became outrageously hot, and as Mr. Holystone had prophesied, cockroaches came on board in large numbers. They were a great nuisance, turning up in wholly unsuitable places: the crow's nest, the captain's bath, the compass, the quartermaster's molasses jar. Dido had a busy and aggravating week. "Love a duck! Why did I ever let myself in for this lay?" she grumbled, while obliged by exacting Mr. Holystone to walk up and down the outside the wardroom door with a copy of the heavy King's Regulations balanced on her head in order to acquire a more dignified and ladylike posture. "Plenty of girls would give their eye teeth to meet a queen," observed Mr. Holystone. He was sitting in his galley so that he could keep an eye on her through the open door while he stuffed half a dozen flying fish with a mixture of minced barnacles and powdered hardtack. "When I did my butler's training in London, there was a young ladies' finishing school in the same building. All the girls talked about was the day when they would make their curtsy before His Majesty King James III. "Finishing school?" growled Dido. "That's a right good name for it. It's liable to finish me, I can tell you." "Now curtsy," said Mr. Holystone calmly. "Do not let the King's Regulations slip off your head. Point to the right toe, swing the leg slowly to the side, then back, bend the left knee, hands move slowly backwards, spreading the fingers wide." The King's Regulations thudded to the floor, narrowly missing the feet of the first lieutenant, a fair-haired young man with a long, earnest face, who came by at that moment. He gave Dido a sympathetic grin and went into the captain's cabin, where they heard him reporting. 13 volcanoes sighted ahead on the starboard bow, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Windward. You may give the order to slacken sail. We shall heave to a safe distance out to sea from the port of Tenby, in case the state of hostility between New Cumbria and its neighbour should have worsened. I hope to receive further information and instructions from the British agent in Tenby." "Aye, aye, sir." Lieutenant Windward saluted and returned on deck. Dido replaced the King's Regulations on her head. She pointed her right toe and announced, "How do you do, Your Majesty?" Then she shakily lowered herself at a bent knee, continuing, "It was kind of you to invite me to your palace." "Oh, fish guts!" as the heavy book crashed to the floor once more. "You had better come in here," said Mr. Holystone, "and practice taking tea. Thumb and 3 fingers together on the handle, small finger extended. Good. Let me hear your tea-table conversation." "No sugar, thank you, Your Majesty, merely a drop of cream." "There, that is just as I like it. Pray, ma'am, from which tradesman did you obtain your tea?" "No, Dido, no. Not pry from which tradesman do you obtain your tie? From which place do you obtain your tea?" "From which place do you obtain your tea?" Mr. Holystone threw up his eyes to heaven. At this moment, a sudden shudder through the ship indicated that the Thrush had hove to. They heard the creak of windlasses and the thud of feet on deck as the sails were lowered. "Oh, please let me go up on deck, Mr. Holy," begged Dido. "I'll practice ever so hard tonight. Cut my throat and swelt me, so I will." Mr. Holystone shrugged and let her go. To his mind, the chances of Dido's acquiring the manners of a polite young lady seemed about as probable as a mouse's nest in a cat's ear. Besides, he thought, how do we know what is considered polite behavior in Bath Regis? Up on deck, Dido glanced eagerly about her. The Cumbrian coast was visible as a line of black cliffs, about 2 miles westward of the Thrush. Those cliffs must be tarnal high, Dido thought, to be so plain from here. But at one point they dropped to a V, and a pinnace, which had put out from the Thrush, was steering for this cleft. Beyond the cliffs and a good deal farther inland, Dido thought, a line of mountains could be seen, a cluster of peaks, very high and spiky, like the teeth of some great trap. Wonder if Bath Regis is up them mountains. If so, it's going to be a scabberish climb getting up there. Oh, scrape it, Dido sighed to herself. Just don't I wish it was the Kentish Flats, and that there port was Gravesend. A considerable bustle was going on about the decks and rigging as the sailors spread sails over the yards to act as awnings, bundled other sails tidily into canvas cases, coiled up the shrouds, and generally prepared the ship for a spell of inactivity. Dido, on the foredeck, had to duck and dodge several times as men dashed past her, or ropes whistled over her head. All of a sudden, she heard an angry yell at the outraged squall of a cat. Spinning round, she was just in time to see the sailor known as Silver Taffy grab hold of Eldorado, who had been perched on one of the main deck 18-pounders, minding her own business. Twirling the cat by her long tail, Taffy tossed her over the side, not, however, before Dora avenged herself by slashing with all her claws at Taffy's face. She whirled through the air, turning over a dozen times, and would certainly have fallen prey to the sharks had she not struck the anchor cable. With despairing strength, the poor animal managed to twine her long, sinuous tail several times round the cable, and so dangled there, swinging and wailing, as she scrabbled frenziedly to grasp the rope with her paws. "Hang on, Dora, I'll get you," shouted Dido, who was not far off. She flung herself over the rail and slid down the anchor cable. Grabbing Eldorado round the chest, she hugged the cat against her and began to work her way upward again. No easy matter, as the frantic Dora bit, struggled, squalled, squirmed, and did all in her power to hinder the rescue. Luckily, a couple of midshipmen had witnessed the incident and leaned over to take the cat from Dido. Dora was a general favorite with all the crew except Silver Taffy, because of her prowess as a mouser. "Thank ye, Mr. Multiple," panted Dido, scrambling over the rail. "Oh, dang it, ain't she a tartar, though? Reckon my face looks like Blackheath Pond after a week's skating," and she wiped the blood from her eyes. "It just about does, Miss Dido," said the red-haired Mr. Multiple with a grin. "You'd best take puss below and get Mr. Holystone to bathe those scritches. That was a right nimble job you did there, miss. Anyone would think you'd spent your life at sea." "Well, I just about have," said Dido. "Here, Dora, you'd best come along with me. Seems you ain't welcome on deck." With a darkling glare at Silver Taffy, she picked up Eldorado, who had resumed her usual calm and was haughtily putting her ruffled copper fur to rights, and carried the cat below. "What in the world have you been at, child?" exclaimed Mr. Holystone. "Captain Hughes will hardly think you fit to attend the Queen's Court if he sees you like that. Here," he anointed Dido's countenance with a most evil-smelling paste of shark's liver and seaweed, ordering her to lie in her bunk for 3 hours, and meanwhile occupy the times usefully reciting a litany that went: "We clean 3 tweed beads a week with Maltese seaweed. Lady Jane Grey, pray do not stray to Mandalay on market day." Dido found this very unfair. She flung herself crossly on her bunk. "We clean 3 tweed beads a week. Oh, butter my brogans, what rubbish!" Luckily, before she had time to become too annoyed, Dido fell fast asleep. The cockroaches had been particularly troublesome the previous night, rustling around with a noise like toast crumbs being shaken inside a paper bag. They had kept her awake for hours. When she next woke, evening had come. The air was cooler and the light was dim. Yawning, she rolled off her bunk. The weight that had settled on her chest proved to be Eldorado, and went up on deck with the cat for a breath of fresh air, keeping a wary eye out for Silver Taffy. She found Mr. Holystone on the foredeck, scraping mussels, which he took from a wicker hamper and dropped, when clean, into a cauldron. Dido squatted down to help him, and he exclaimed with satisfaction on the healing work already accomplished by the shark paste. "Miss Dido," he went on in a lower tone, I cannot sufficiently express my obligation to you for saving my poor Dora from that ruffian. Young Multiple told me the whole while you were asleep. I had thought you must have been teasing Dora. I might have known I was wrong." Dido kindly forgave his unjust suspicions. "Anyhows, if you thought I'd been pulling Dora's tail, Mr. Holy, it was right kind of you to doctor me. But why is that Silver Taffy so down on poor Dora?" When we were at Nombre de Dios, a fortune teller, came on deck telling fortunes by dropping a spoonful of soot into people's hands. She told Taffy that the lines of his hands foretold that a cat would be the end of him. He is a very superstitious fellow, said Mr. Holystone, shrugging. No wonder he's so tarnal mean to Dora. I'm surprised you let her up on deck. Oh, she can usually look after herself. The El Dorado cats have a superior degree of intelligence. Are there others like her, then? Indeed, yes. Where I come from in High Brazil and in Lyonese, such cats are not uncommon. With such long tails? Many longer still. They can swing on trees as nimbly as any ape. I have heard it said that there were such cats in the lost garden where our forefathers walked with the gods. Fancy, said Dido, looking thoughtfully at Mr. Holystone. She asked after a moment, Is it a nice place, that land of High Brazil, where you come from? A cloud appeared to pass over the steward's brow. He began to say something, checked himself after a moment, merely remarked, Yes, it is a pleasant place. Then he stood up, easily lifting the heavy cauldron of cleaned mussels. Captain Hughes has invited the British agent to dinner, see? There is the pinnace. There is the pinnace, putting out to fetch him. Bring down the basket, Miss Dido, if you will be so kind. Mr. Brandywind, the British agent, proved when he came on board to be a blotchy-faced, wandering-eyed, seedy-looking individual. He wore a tricorn hat, snuff-colored suit, silver-buckled shoes. His sandy, thinning hair was dressed in a style long out of date, tied at the back with a small, gross-grained bow. Dido, peering through the galley doorway as he passed, thought how untrustworthy he looked, and she guessed that Captain Hughes felt the same, for his voice, when he greeted Brandywind, was noticeably quiet and dry. Claret, sir, or ship's grog, or would you care for a cup of tea? Grog, sir. Grog will do capitally. Thank you, Captain, Mr. Brandywind replied, in a tone that was both eager and creaking, like a rusty handle cranked at an uneven rate. Grog, now, is excellent, if it is well mixed on shore. I must tell you, we combine it with a little orc cane spirit, you know. Then, if at the same time you smoke a pipe or two of abaca, hangman's weed, that is, why, you could believe yourself a veritable pasha. I believe even the White Queen herself. Then the captain's door was shut, and the two voices died to a murmur. Chemina, said Dido. What a havey-cavey cove. He looks as if he'd sell his own ma for cat's meat, don't you think so, Mr. Holly? Very likely his life is a lonely one, said Mr. Holystone guardedly. The port of Tenby is a small place, cut off by a great forest from the interior and the capital. What's the forest called? Broselai, Andy. So how do we get through if we're going to Bath to see the Queen? By boat. Tenby lies at the mouth of a great river, the Severn. It is the captain's intention to hire a boat and travel by water. Dido was rather disappointed. Having been at sea for most of the last 18 months, she had hoped for a spell on land, but Mr. Holystone assured her that there would be plenty of that. Halfway along its course, the Severn River was interrupted by a formidable series of cataracts dashing down from the Andes Mountains in the west of New Cumbria. These falls were not navigable, and so the party must take to land at that point. The captain's bell rang, and Mr. Holystone went off to remove the bowls, to remove the bowls of mussel shells and replace them with fresh mutton and hearts of palm brought out from shore by the pinnace. Dido, busy decorating a chocolate cake with babasu nuts, judged from the voices coming through the door that Mr. Brandywind was becoming garrulous from drink and the unaccustomed company. You ask what the Queen is like, the White Queen? My dear sir, she's rum as they come. How do you do, sir? What's your game? Rum, Rumpelstiltskin is my name, he caroled. The White Queen, they call her because of her hair, you know, etc., etc. Sits at her embroidery all day long, says she's waiting. Waiting for what, you ask? You may well ask. But as to that, mum's the word. Both rum and mum. Her Royal Majesty ain't confidential. If the Queen is so unapproachable, persisted Captain Hughes, does she have reliable ministers, advisers round her to whom one may apply? Oh, aye. There are some villainous-looking old scallywags with beards down to their shins. The Vicar General, the Grand Inquisitor, the Accuser, the Advocate of the Queen's Tribunal, each more slippery than the next, if you ask me. Besides, then there is the Queen's Gesture, or Soothsayer, if you prefer the term. Soothsayer? What is he? Demanded the captain in a tone of disgust. But before Dido could catch the answer, Mr. Holystone emerged with a tray-load of plates, and the door was closed. During the rest of dinner, it remained shut, and no more of Mr. Brandywin's disclosures could be heard. Dido, who had finished decorating the cake, was told to run up on deck and take the air. For, said Mr. Holystone, you have done more to help me than is fitting, though indeed I am very much obliged. Oh, pooh! Or oh, foo, retorted Dido. You know your conversation's always an education, Mr. Holy. I'm a-learning all the time, and I'm a-helping you. Deportment and manners, too. She put out her tongue at him teasingly and skipped out on deck with a small cake, which he had baked for her in a separate pan. Dusk had fallen by now, and large southern stars were beginning to twinkle out in the deep blue above the Thrush, though the Cumbrian coast and the snow-covered western peaks were still outlined against a sky of pale phosphorescent green. Earlier that evening, Dido had, without asking permission, removed from the captain's cabin an exceedingly powerful telescope, which was one of his most valued possessions, for when carefully focused it had the power to render clearly visible objects which might be 50 or even 100 miles off. He ain't about to use it while he's a-giving dinner and doing the civil to old Brandy Blossom, calculated Dido, so there's no harm in my borrowing it for a couple of hours. When she had eaten her cake, she drew the glass from its case, and with its help studied various features of the twilit shore. She could see the small town of Tenby clearly enough. Its wharves, quays, gotta remember to say that in the proper British way, its wharves, quays, the shipping at anchor in the river mouth, the tall black and white houses with feathery palms above them on the hillside. Then there came a belt of dense green, presumably the forest. Of Brosalinde, full of pythons, pumas, alligators, and aurochs. Beyond that again, much further off, hardly visible to the naked eye, but clear enough through the powerful glass, lay a line of silvery foothills below the higher peaks. Dido stared at these hills, trying to discover the point at which the Severn River tumbled over them in its majestic series of cataracts. She thought she had found the right spot, a white zigzag line against the gray of the hills, when she chanced on an even more interesting sight, what looked like a long procession of camels moving very slowly southward across the lens of the telescope. Were they camels? If not camels, then what else could they be? They were shaggy, long-haired beasts, long-necked, too, with heads like those of sheep. Each bore on its back a large, bulging pack. Each was led by a drover, and the procession crept at a snail's pace, as if the loads were a tremendous weight. As they toiled along, they were outlined clearly, some against the green sunset sky, some against the rose-flushed snow-clad peaks. "Blow me!" muttered Dido. "Ain't there a right lot of them just?" She began to count, but counting was not Dido's strong point, and she gave up after 4 sets of 20. "Reckon they must use camels in New Cumbria, where we'd use carriers' carts," she decided. "Maybe they finds it best to shift goods at night, when the aurochs have gone to roost. Them aurochs must be a plaguey nuisance, if they can scrag a sheep or cow like Dora nobbles a mouse." The last of the line of loaded camels disappeared into a dark cleft among the hills. It was now becoming really dark. Following Mr. Holystone's instructions for doing so, Dido found the Southern Cross. Then she heard the pinnace being whistled for. So she tucked the telescope under her duffel jacket and went below. As she descended the companionway, Mr. Brandywind, and the captain came out of the dining room. Perhaps by tomorrow, the captain was saying, you will have received more information as to this loss that Her Majesty has sustained. Oh, what she has lost she refuses to say, caroled Mr. Brandywind. It seems to have vanished like last Wednesday. Let's hope not, retorted Captain Hughes acidly, while my mission is but a sleeveless errand. A fool's errand? What a shocking thought! A fool in the forest of Broceliande, 1 foot on the water and 1 on the land. At this moment, Mr. Brandywind laid eyes on Dido, who was politely waiting in the galley doorway for the 2 men to pass by. The agent's bloodshot eyes bulged until it looked as if they would burst from their sockets like horse chestnuts. He gulped, gasped, and fell into such a fit of coughing and choking that if he had been on deck, it seemed highly probable that he would have fallen overboard as he staggered about. Deuce take the fellow! Exclaimed Captain Hughes impatiently. Here, Holystone, thwack him on the back. Give him some hartshorn or spirits of tar. Otherwise, the man will take an apoplexy. Restoratives having been administered, Mr. Brandywind was presently able to mop his streaming eyes, and apologize. It is nothing, a trifling infirmity, he panted, still staggering. Takes me thus at times, but it is nothing at all, I assure you. A slight disability resulting from the quantity of pepper in the diet hereabouts. Nothing, sir, nothing. You must try the pepper pot stew, Captain. I do urge you to try the pepper pot. Yes, very well, replied Captain Hughes, not at all interested in pepper pot stew. Now I shall be obliged, Mr. Brandywind, if you can arrange for beds in Tenby for my party tomorrow night, since we must board the river boat so early. Unless you can accommodate me and my men in your residence. Quite out of the question, said the agent hastily. Only 2 bedrooms, 1 for me and my dear wife, and 1 for our little angel. No, sir. Rooms shall be bespoken for you at the White Hart. Fair tap there, but don't trust the gin. But, Captain, you never informed me, you never gave me to understand that you had a young female person, a child among your crew. I was not apprised of this. Why in the world should you be? Snapped the captain. It is of very little import, and she is not a member of my crew, good heavens. I should hope not indeed, merely a supercargo, a kind of passenger whom I am escorting back to England, and I intend taking her to wait on Queen Ginevra, and she will require more suitable apparel. The captain glanced with disfavor at Dido's jacket and trousers. Is there, he asked Mr. Brandywind, a dressmaker in Tenby, or a milliner, haberdasher, needlewoman, who could supply Miss there with an outfit to wear at court? If Mr. Brandywind could have become more flabbergasted, this announcement, it seemed, must have rendered him so. He gaped at Captain Hughes, feebly flapped his hands up and down, opened and shut his mouth several times before at length replying, You intend on taking Miss to visit the Queen? Indeed, and you require some apparel. Petticoats, a gown, a sash. What about your good lady, Mrs. Brandywind? Mrs. Brandywind, perhaps she might know the name of some seamstress. Really, I am not. That is to say, she does not. Or at least, perhaps I and young miss could wait on your good lady at your house, sir, cut in the captain, as the agent's replies did not seem to be tending in any useful direction. We will bestow our luggage at the inn tomorrow, leave my first lieutenant to make arrangements for our trip upriver, and then call at your house. If, he added with some irony, if this will suit your convenience, Mr. Brandywind. Mr. Brandywind almost threw himself into another paroxysm in his efforts to assure the captain as to his zeal to be of use. There would not be the least difficulty in the world about fitting some suitable person. Suitable, ha, ha! For she will supply the young lady with a suit, he concluded with a burst of almost hysterical merriment. And I wish you good night, dear friend, dear friend. Would that such evenings might never, never end. So saying, he bounded over the rail with such agility that, had there not been a coxswain waiting to receive him in the boat, his evening would most probably have ended in the jaws of a shark. Captain Hughes went forward to the quarter-deck. From the irritable haste of his steps as he paced to and fro, the state of his mind could be guessed at. Dido availed herself of this chance to restore the telescope to its place on the captain's desk. And we will pause there.